Hi everybody, very welcome to Mentour and yet another video podcast. As always, I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. Today on the video, guys, social distancing on aircraft. Is it even possible to do? And what kind of measures can we expect from pilots and cabin crew, you the passengers, and how much of a pain in the ass is it going to be to fly as a passenger once this pandemic is over? Stay tuned.
Wind 31016, everyone right, going on right. Third land, 31 right. Delta 260, just produced.
This video is brought to you together with NordVPN. So you might have found yourself, just like I have, sitting a lot using your home computer for doing work-related things during the last few weeks. But the problem with that is that cybercrime has absolutely skyrocketed, and it has become increasingly important for you to make sure that your IT hygiene is up to scratch. I found that out myself. My Facebook page, Mentor Pilot, got hacked the other week, and it took me a lot of work and a lot of money to get that back using lawyers, things like that. So in order to avoid things like that to happen, make sure that you have the basic covered. And one of the basics are to have a really good VPN service. Now, NordVPN is a very good VPN service. It will help encrypt your data to make sure that your data is not stolen. It will make sure that they cannot see where you're operating from, and it's really, really quick. They have servers all over the globe, and they have a new VPN protocol called NordLynx that you can check. Actually, there's a separate link for that in the description of the video. But in any way, if you use this link here below, you'll get a whopping 70% off the normal fee of NordVPN, which brings it down to only $3.49 per month, and you'll get 1 month absolutely for free. So use this code and the coupon code PILOT and start protecting yourself on the internet today. All right, so we are starting to see some signs of the airlines returning to service. Airlines are starting to look at how their summer schedule for 2020 will look, also the winter schedule, and how they're gradually going to ramp up as passenger demand starts coming back. But one of the things that has become painfully clear is that for passengers to come back, they need to be assured that it's safe to do so. Now, the airlines are working on different ways of doing this. The authorities are working on other ways to do this. And the risk now is that we might come up with an uncoordinated response to this pandemic from an airline point of view. Now, Eurocontrol did a really, really interesting survey, which I have linked to here in the description of the video, that showed the difference between a coordinated attempt to regain passenger confidence and an uncoordinated attempt. Now, what we want to say with that is that it is really important that airlines, for example, know what rules they're working under. So if we find ourselves in a situation where an aircraft flying from Spain to the United Kingdom have different rules in the airport of departure as in the airport of arrival, it is going to cause a lot of confusion. It's going to cause a lot of problems for the airline, and it might delay the ramping up of the operation. So it is really, really important that the industry now sits down together with the likes of EASA, for example, or the FAA, or all of the aviation authorities, and make sure that whatever measures that they want to do to make it as safe as possible for you to travel is coordinated. They know what kind of rule book to follow. Now, the industry has made it very, very clear that they do not want the authorities to do some kind of knee-jerk reaction to implement rules that will look like they're really good. You know, for the untrained eye, for someone who's not an epidemiologist, it might look like a really good idea, but in reality, it doesn't work. And a good example of that is the proposal that has come out during the last few weeks about taking away the middle seat in a 3-seat row. So why is that a bad idea then? Well, the fact is that it just will not help. It's one of those things that will look good on paper but doesn't work in reality. And why we're saying that is because if you look at, for example, the World Health Organization, WHO's recommendations for social distancing, you need at least 3 feet in between people in order for social distancing to be effective. Now 3 feet is the equivalent of a meter. And 1 seat is about 43 centimeters. So that means that if you take away 1 seat and you still are sitting next to that seat, you have about 1.5 feet in between, maybe 2 feet in between. But on top of that, you also have the social distancing rules that comes out from the CDC in the United States, which states that you should actually be about 6 feet away from someone else. Now the difference in these rules comes from the fact that the World Health Organization's recommendation was made back in the 1930s. Now there was an outbreak of tuberculosis back in the 1930s, and there was some initial studies done on heavy droplets and how far they would travel after a sneeze, and that indicated about 3 feet. But recent studies have shown that the smaller droplets that can still contain virus can travel as much as 6 feet, and that's where the CDC recommendation comes from. Now, to further make that more complicated, that same study has also shown that some aerosols can travel as far as 23 to 27 feet away and still be contagious. So this would indicate that social distancing, especially within an aircraft, is going to be much more complicated than just taking away 1 seat. If you would go with the CDC recommendation of taking away every passenger within 6 feet, well then, instead of taking away 1 seat per row, you need to take away between 7 or 8 seats. Now, those of you who are skilled in maths will notice that if you take away 1 seat in a seat row with 3 seats, you take away about 33% of the passenger capacity in an airliner. And in order for an airline to break even, to start making money, you need to have a load factor of between 75% in the really, really effective airlines up to maybe 85-87% in the ones that are less effective. So by taking away 33%, you are effectively making it almost impossible to make any kind of money without increasing the prices steeply for the passengers who are still traveling. Right? So, and if you wanted to take away, to give the 6 feet rule, it is impossible to continue an airline. And this is exactly what, for example, the CEO of Ryanair went out and said during the week. He said that if the rule of taking away the middle seats is enforced, Ryanair will just not fly because it's not financially viable to do so. So this just brings the question then, what can we do? The passengers will not return unless they feel that traveling is safe with an airline. So what kind of measures can we expect? You might have seen that last week an Italian seat manufacturer came out with some suggestions about putting screens onto existing seats in order to create a barrier between passengers. They also had a suggestion about creating something called a Janus seat, which is 2 passengers facing forward and 1 passenger facing back with screens in between to increase social distancing. Once again, these look like good solution to it. However, just looking at it, one of the issues with making or adding things onto existing seats is that the seats right now are constructed in order to enable passengers to escape during an evacuation as quickly as possible. Now you know that when you're traveling, and if you have even the seat table down, the cabin crew will tell you to put it up during takeoff and landing, and that is for that particular reason. So this is why I can see that adding screens in between passengers might become an issue when it comes to the evacuation rule. Might be tested though. We'll see what happens. But the fact is that what we are more likely to see are preventive measures, all right? Rather than trying to separate people that are already in the aircraft, it is much better to make sure that they're not sick in the first place before they're getting onto the aircraft. So the things that we're likely to see, if we start with, for example, what the cabin crew and what the pilots are going to do, is extensive use of PPE, personal protective equipment. So things like masks, gloves, visors in some cases, are likely to be used from when we enter the terminal building until we get onto the aircraft and anytime that we're in contact with passengers. Now, these might be temporary measures. It might also be measures that will stay for longer, but at least to start with, while this pandemic is still ongoing, this is going to be crucial. All right. Other things is going to be things like interaction with passengers. So checking boarding cards are likely going to either change or disappear completely. Meal services, I would expect that you can that you'll get more pre-packaged food and less food that has had any kind of interaction with the crew. Use of money for paying. Most likely you are going to see only credit card touchless payment rather than dealing with loose change or any kind of currency. It's probably going to be less in-flight meals, in-flight services made as well. KLM went out and said that they are going to keep one toilet for crew only, because the crew are the ones that are going to interact with the passengers, and it's important that they have a clean, separate toilet to clean themselves up with before they start interacting with passenger meals or passenger service in any kind of way. You can also expect things like more frequent aircraft cleaning. When it comes to the pilots, I think that we are going to be subjected to the same kind of rules as the cabin crew when we move through the terminal and when we are greeting passengers or when we're in contact with cabin crew when it comes to masks and potentially gloves. But I think as we enter the cockpit, it's unlikely that we will have to use masks, for example. In the 737, the cockpit is fed from a separate air conditioning duct and we have the closed cockpit door behind us. So I don't really think that that's going to be an issue in the cockpit. But for the cabin crew, we're definitely going to see things like that. Another thing that we might see change for us as crew is the use of crew rooms. So at the moment, when the crew gathers up before a flight, we go to a specific room where we can find our briefing tables, our briefing computers, where we meet up with cabin crew and things like that. Now, it's very likely that most airlines is going to change from that policy and give the crew the possibility to download any briefing equipment that they might need onto their iPads or similar equipment, and then they would just meet up in the aircrafts instead and do any briefings on board. So those are some changes that we can expect. Now, when it comes to you as passengers, remember how things changed back after 9/11 when it came to security and how security was pretty relaxed before 9/11 and then it wasn't anymore? Well, we can expect very similar changes to happen now when it comes to health control. So things like, for example, quick tests, if they are available for the virus, you might expect that. Temperature controls as well, either by sensors, scanners, or physical temperature controls before you board an aircraft, or just general health checks. So if you're sitting and you're obviously looking sick, people are going to be monitoring that and potentially stop passengers from entering the aircraft. Other things like the use of masks, potentially gloves, loads of these hand sanitizer stations, social distancing in boarding queues, so maybe slowing down by boarding by only sending in groups of 10 at specific seats in order to maximize the social distancing as much as possible. These are all potential things that might be implemented, at least during the pandemic. So that's it, guys. Do I think that it's going to be fun, this? No. Do I think it's going to be a pain in the ass? Yeah, I do. But this is what we all have to do during this pandemic, guys. Until we can find a working vaccine and eradicate the thing, or at least find some kind of medication that alleviates the symptoms, we are going to have to do what it takes to keep ourselves, yourselves, our family, our sick, our healthcare workers as safe as possible. So I want to go back flying, you want to go back traveling, so let's just gather together and do what we can to make this happen, all right? I miss flying so much, but I also understand that you cannot go back flying unless there is a safe way of doing this. So let's just now hope that the airlines can communicate well with the lawmakers out there, and that they can come up with rules that make sense, that are effective, that doesn't make it impossible for the airlines to make money, and just get back traveling again. If this means that we're going to get higher, that it's going to cost more to travel, it probably will, because things like increasing boarding times is effectively going to cost money for the airlines. So in any way, I think that we are going to see on a long perspective, an increase in ticket prices. But I think it is probably worth it. It has been insanely cheap for a lot of time, especially here in Europe. The ticket prices will probably go up, and I think that we can all probably survive that. So without further ado, guys, I will continue to keep giving you this kind of information. I hope that you're enjoying the channel. I hope that I have earned a subscription. And if I have, subscribe and click the notification bell. Make sure that you have all notifications on, because I do things like live streams with other YouTubers, which you don't want to miss. I did a great one with CW Lemoyne the other day, which was one of the most fun interviews that I've ever done. But I do other things as well, and I'm going to increase the amount of cool stuff coming up on the channel. So subscribe, put the notification bell on, follow me on other social media like Instagram, for example. I am on Twitter as well, but most importantly, get the free Mentour Aviation app. All right, it is completely free to download, and you will get news pushes coming out of it. You get loads of all of the latest aviation news from all over the world in there. You can speak to other pilots, aviation enthusiasts, or nervous flyers if you're one of those. And you will also get pushes when something interesting happens. So get the app, see you inside of the app, have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Right, guys, I really hope that you liked that. If you want more content like that, more aviation content, well then, check this out. I hope that you have subscribed to the channel and that you've highlighted the little notification bell. See you inside of the Mentour Aviation app, and have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye-bye.